Interview with the Director of the First CIS Department of the Russian Foreign Ministry, MV. Agasandyan, with RIA Novosti, August 20, 2024. Question: in light of the current military-political situation on the continent, what do you see as the priority tasks for the Collective Security Treaty Organization, CSTO? How effectively is the organization adapting to changing conditions? What is the current situation regarding Yerevan's participation in CSTO activities? Answer: Russia is consistently working to enhance the CSTO's potential as an effective structure responsible for maintaining stability not only in member states but also across the vast Eurasian space. The organization has repeatedly proven its relevance, including during the events in Kazakhstan 2 years ago when peacekeeping contingents from the alliance helped stabilize the domestic situation within days. We are not resting on our laurels. Together with our allies, we are continuously working to enhance the CSTO's capabilities in addressing multifaceted security challenges and improving crisis response mechanisms. We share the experience gained by the Russian armed forces during the special military operation with our partners. In the coming weeks, a series of exercises with various components of the organization's collective forces is planned in Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan. These exercises are aimed at refining joint actions to protect stability in the Central Asian Collective Security region, particularly considering the situation in Afghanistan. The implementation of a CSTO project to strengthen the Tajik-Afghan border will further secure the southern borders of the alliance. Not to mention the regular joint activities of law enforcement agencies and special services in combating terrorism, extremism, drug trafficking, and illegal migration. The organization is a dynamic and flexible mechanism, adapting to modern realities, as evidenced by the constant expansion of the scope of joint activities. Today, particular attention is focused on areas such as biological and information security. Traditionally, the CSTO agenda includes strengthening foreign policy coordination, developing peacekeeping capabilities, including the potential for deploying the organization's contingents in UN peacekeeping operations. Together with our allies, we are committed to expanding the organization's partnerships, especially with friendly regional structures like the CIS and SCO. We also see interest in the CSTO's work from several Eurasian states that share the view on the importance of creating a unified, indivisible, and reliable security space on the continent. All these issues will undoubtedly be the focus of discussions among the CSTO leaders at the upcoming Collective Security Council session in Astana on November 28. Member states are united in the need for the organization's continued steady development. Question: what is the current situation regarding Yerevan's participation in CSTO activities? Answer: as for Armenia's participation in the CSTO's overall work, there is currently a trend in Yerevan towards disengagement from such cooperation. This stance, in our view, contradicts the interests of the Armenian people and significantly weakens national security. Ultimately, there are no alternatives to the CSTO and Russia as guarantors of the republic's stability. At this stage, the doors remain open for Armenia's full return to cooperation within the CSTO, and mutual obligations within the organization remain unchanged. We hope that our Armenian partners, overcoming their doubts, will once again demonstrate a commitment to engaged cooperation in the strategic interests of the friendly Armenian people. Question: in light of recent high-profile crimes, there have been calls to tighten the migration regime with CIS countries. Is this being discussed within the organization? Is it possible to introduce a visa regime with any CIS countries? Conversely, could migration controls within the CIS be relaxed? For example, could seamless borders like those between Russia and Belarus be introduced with other member countries? Answer: Russia is the leading destination within the CIS for attracting labor migrants. The majority of these migrants have historically come from other CIS member states. According to some estimates, more than 9 million citizens from CIS countries entered Russia last year. Therefore, cooperation in the field of migration is a priority for us. Russia remains open to citizens from other countries who strictly adhere to our laws and regulations, and who respect local traditions and culture. In the CIS, with the exception of Turkmenistan, a visa-free regime is in place, regulated by bilateral and multilateral agreements. Introducing a visa regime would require at least a review of these international treaties. Currently, there are no discussions within the organization either about tightening or relaxing the existing entry regime. However, the legal framework in this sector is constantly being improved, including as a response to emerging challenges and threats. For instance, due to the increasing number of attempts to illegally cross the border using forged documents, mandatory fingerprint registration has been introduced for all labor migrants. Systematic measures are being taken to strengthen control over migration flows, with the relevant procedures gradually moving into the digital realm. Question: Since 2005, Turkmenistan has considered itself an associate member of the CIS. Is it possible for Ashgabat to become a full member of the organization? Is the abolition of the visa regime with Turkmenistan currently being considered? Answer: Indeed, Turkmenistan positions itself as an associate member of the CIS because it did not sign the CIS Charter, although it participates in many other fundamental documents of the organization. Currently, the issue of changing this status is not on the agenda, which does not prevent Ashgabat from making a significant constructive contribution to the Commonwealth's activities in many areas. Turkmenistan is actively involved in developing political dialogue and is usually well represented at meetings of the highest statutory bodies of the CIS. In 2019, under the Turkmen chairmanship, important documents such as the Declaration on Strategic Economic Cooperation and the Action Program to Intensify Partnership between the CIS foreign ministries were adopted. On May 24, a meeting of the CIS Council of Heads of Government was held in Ashgabat, during which it was decided to declare Ashgabat the city of new sports opportunities for the Commonwealth, which will undoubtedly give additional impetus to the development of sports relations. We are interested in expanding cooperation with our Turkmen partners on all issues on the Commonwealth's agenda, including in the context of implementing the priorities of Russia's chairmanship of the organization this year. Currently, travel between Russian citizens and Turkmen citizens is carried out in accordance with the provisions of the agreement between the government of the Russian Federation and the government of Turkmenistan on mutual travel of citizens from July 17, 1999. At present, the issue of abolishing the visa regime between our countries is not on the agenda. Question: Earlier, you mentioned that the EAEU would expand its network of countries with which it would conclude free trade agreements. As far as we know, corresponding negotiations are currently underway. What progress has been made in creating free trade zones? Which negotiations are in the final stages? Answer: The EAEU is a rapidly developing organization, so the search for new trading partners is a natural process. The geographic scope of our interests is gradually expanding, as the Union is open to dialogue and cooperation with countries that share its fundamental principles, such as respect for sovereignty, equality, and mutual benefit. To initiate negotiations with a new potential partner on trade liberalization, consensus within the five is required, meaning all 5 member countries must have a mutual economic interest in the agreement. Currently, the EAEU has 4 trade agreements in force, free trade agreements, FTAs, with Vietnam, Iran, and Serbia, and a non-preferential agreement with China. Negotiations between the EAEU and Indonesia are in the final stages. The 5th round of consultations took place in late July of this year, and the parties are now finalizing the text of the draft agreement. Additionally, in June of this year, another round of negotiations was held with the United Arab Emirates on concluding an FTA. Intensive intercessional work on the draft agreement is ongoing, and we expect that during the consultations tentatively scheduled for September this year, the parties will be able to further narrow their differences. In early July of this year, a meeting was held regarding the conclusion of a temporary trade agreement between the Union and Mongolia, where we reached principal agreements on the content of this document. We anticipate that it will be signed by the end of this year. As you can see, this summer has been marked by intensive negotiation processes. The negotiation track with Egypt remains open. Following 6 rounds, the majority of the regulatory provisions of the agreement have been agreed upon. The Union's interaction with Beijing is carried out within the framework of the Agreement on Trade and Economic Cooperation of May 17, 2018. The Joint Commission meets regularly to discuss both current work and future directions. We also expect to hold the first round of negotiations on an FTA between the Union and India soon. We hope it will take place in the near future. Consultations with Israel have not been conducted since 2020. Tel Aviv was not prepared at the time to reach a mutually acceptable balance of trade concessions. For the Union, a free trade agreement in such a format would not be of value. Question: the EAEU and Singapore signed a free trade agreement in 2019. However, in March 2022, Singapore imposed a series of sanctions against Russia and was included in Russia's list of unfriendly countries. How has this affected the cooperation between the two states? Answer: this agreement was initially package-based and was meant to come into force simultaneously with bilateral agreements on trade in services and investments, which each EAEU member state was to negotiate separately with Singapore. As you can understand, each Union country has its own pace of work on such bilateral agreements. As for Russia, due to the unfriendly stance of the city-state, the corresponding work has been suspended, and at present, the prospects for reaching a bilateral agreement on services and investments are not foreseeable. Question: how might the current Armenian government's desire for closer cooperation with the European Union and NATO affect Yerevan's relationship with the EAEU? Answer: the relationship between Moscow and Yerevan within the EAEU framework is based on mutually beneficial cooperation. One doesn't need to be an expert in economics or politics to observe the obvious. The union is advantageous for Yerevan, largely contributing to Armenia's impressive economic growth, which few can boast. For instance, in the first 3 months of 2024, the country's GDP grew by more than 9%, the highest rate among EAEU member states. From 2015 to 2023, Armenia increased its exports to the Union's market by 14 times from $0.25 billion to $3.6 billion. The volume of cross-border remittances to Armenia from other EAEU member states grew by 3.8 times between 2015 and 2023, from $1.05 billion to $4.0 billion. Naturally, all this enables the collection of more taxes, the creation of jobs, and an improvement in the quality of life for the population. The Union provides all the necessary conditions for employment. As for Yerevan's course toward closer cooperation with the European Union and NATO, it is evident that our partners have fallen for the West's promises of investments, technologies, and a bright future. This approach has been repeatedly used in the post-Soviet space, and we all know and see the outcomes. It's important to understand that external forces cannot objectively address the issues of regions where they do not have a direct presence, and their main goal is to drive a wedge into cooperation with Russia. The Eurasian Economic Union is a reality, with tangible advantages and achievements. We expect that pragmatism and common sense will prevail, preventing Armenia from abandoning these benefits in favor of long-term uncertainty. After all, compare the objective trade turnover figures between Armenia and the EAEU countries with those of external players, and it should become clear to any unbiased observer. Question: is Moscow satisfied with the growth rate of internal trade within the EAEU? What is your forecast for trade turnover in 2024? What portion of trade turnover is settled in national currencies, including Russian rubles? How much has this share increased in the first half of 2024? Answer: the mutual trade among EAEU member states has shown steady growth. For example, by the end of 2023, the volume of trade within the Union had nearly doubled compared to 2015, when our Union first began operating, reaching $87.5 billion USD. I would like to highlight not only the quantitative but also the qualitative changes. A significant share of the trade within the EAEU consists of high-value-added products such as machinery, equipment, and so forth. Making economic forecasts is the work of other specialists and experts. However, our outlook is positive, and we are firmly confident in the continued growth of mutual trade volumes within the FIVE this year. Regarding the statistics on the use of national currencies in mutual settlements, this figure is approximately 90%. This achievement is largely due to the coordinated efforts of EAEU member states, who recognize the need to reduce the risks associated with the unrestrained use of Western financial instruments, which, as we have seen repeatedly, have become a means of overt pressure to achieve political goals, thereby discrediting their reliability. The Union's members are also guided by the recommendations on developing the use of national currencies in mutual trade, adopted by the heads of government in August 2022. This document outlines comprehensive approaches, including ensuring the interaction of national payment systems, expanding the network of correspondent accounts, developing currency pair trading within the Union, and much more.